Michelle Obama appeared on the Jay Shetty On Purpose podcast. Jay Shetty's podcast is the world's #1 mental health podcast. And the interview was mainly about mental health, but then the conversation got political when she was asked by Jay about her worries. And she said, he said, what is the thing that keeps you up at night now, or what is your biggest fear after having overcome so many? And she said there's a thing such as knowing too much after being married to the president. And then she talked about wars and AI and climate change and voter turnout. And then she turned to the upcoming election and said this.
What's going to happen in this next election? I am terrified about what could possibly happen because our leaders matter. Who we select, who speaks for us, who holds that bully pulpit. It affects us in ways that sometimes I think people take for granted. You know, the fact that people think that government, does it really even do anything? And I'm like, oh my God, does government do everything for us? And we cannot take this democracy for granted. And sometimes I worry that we do. Those are the things that keep me up.
I think most people, especially this day and age, do not take democracy for granted. We see what's happening in our country right now with open borders, with inflation, how we're going to interview someone coming up who has a restaurant and how expensive it is now to run his restaurant. A BLT now has to be $16 because it's so expensive to buy all the products. I think we do know how important elections are. But of course, she's going to say that. Her husband, his vice president, was Joe Biden, who's running against Donald Trump.
Who started the civil rights movement, we found out yesterday. So I thank him for that. Unfortunately, I didn't know if that came up with Senator Byrd when he was talking about his old Grand Wizard days because they were best friends and he spoke at his funeral. But Michelle Obama has never sounded like a candidate before. And I'm not saying she sounds like a candidate now, but if the wheels do come off, if she's that concerned, maybe this is laying the groundwork for I have no choice. There is nobody else. I have to jump in.
Do you think that, Brian, after she said this, there's such thing as knowing too much? And when you're married to the President of the United States, who knows everything about everything in the world, sometimes you just want to turn it off. Sounds like she doesn't want to jump back in.
It does sound like it. You know what? Her comment where she says she's terrified by the outcome of 2024, it sounds like she doesn't have much confidence in Joe Biden. And while we have surmised, and we heard from Ted Cruz, he thinks that she's
terrified either way, no matter who wins.
But what's interesting, something that happened yesterday, and if Joe Biden were to drop out, Michelle Obama's name has come up. Gavin Newsom's name has come up, but he's from the state of California, and that's problematic because a lot of people across the country don't like his policies. Interestingly enough, yesterday, guess who started a super PAC?
Who?
Super PAC was started on behalf of the very popular Democrat governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, 46 years old. He won re-election, I think, by 4 or 5 points in a state as a Democrat that Donald Trump won by over 20 points. He is a rising star in the Democratic Party. And look at that. Just at the time when people are talking about Joe Biden might drop out, Andy Beshear suddenly out of nowhere says, hey, take a look at me.